The woman on the bench was breaking apart in the middle of Grand Central Station, and no one noticed. Or maybe they did, but no one cared enough to stop. No one except a 5-year-old girl clutching her last $5, money meant for a book, not a stranger. A crumpled bill, a crying stranger, and a little girl who had no idea that $5 would crack open a billionaire's guarded heart and rewrite 3 lives forever. What followed would expose a secret worth billions and prove that sometimes the smallest hands carry the greatest power. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Daddy, why is that lady crying? Travis Shields felt his daughter's small hand tighten around his fingers. They were standing on the crowded platform of Grand Central Station, waiting for the Brooklyn train, and Nina's blue eyes were locked on a woman sitting alone on a bench 20 feet away. The woman's shoulders were shaking. Even through the chaos of commuters rushing past, Travis could see the tears streaming down her face. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said quietly. "Sometimes people have hard days." Nina's brow furrowed in that serious way that reminded him so much of Elena. "Like you?" The question landed like a punch. Travis thought he had been hiding it better, the exhaustion, the fear, the crushing weight of trying to hold everything together with both hands while the world kept slipping through his fingers. Yeah, he admitted. Like me sometimes. He watched as Nina reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. His heart sank. That was her book fare money, the money he'd scraped together from returning bottles and cans. She'd been talking about which book to buy for 2 days straight. "Nina, what are you—" But she was already walking toward the woman, her small boots clicking against the tile with determined purpose. Travis followed, his mouth dry, unsure whether to stop her or let this play out. The woman on the bench looked up as Nina approached. Up close, Travis could see she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe early 30s. She wore worn jeans and an oversized sweater. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like any other tired New Yorker taking a break from the world. "Excuse me." Nina's voice was small but steady. "Are you okay?" The woman's eyes widened slightly. She opened her mouth, and for a moment, Travis thought she'd give the automatic response everyone gave. "I'm fine, thank you." Instead, she said, "Not really, but that's okay. Sometimes people aren't okay." Nina nodded, processing this with the gravity only a 5-year-old could bring to such observations. Then she held out her hand, the $5 bill resting in her small palm. "This is for you, to help you feel better." The woman stared at the money like it was something precious and impossible. "I can't take your money, sweetheart." "But I want you to have it." Nina's face was so serious. "My daddy says, when people have hard days, sometimes they need help. And I was going to buy a book, but I have lots of books already. You look like you need this more." She paused, and Travis watched as something shifted in his daughter's expression, something older than her years, something that carried the weight of loss she was too young to fully understand. "My mommy always said that kindness costs nothing, but it's worth everything. She's in heaven now, but I still remember." Travis saw the exact moment the woman's carefully constructed walls cracked. Her eyes filled with fresh tears, but these were different. Not the hollow tears of loneliness, but something warmer, something that looked almost like hope. "What's your name?" the woman asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nina. Nina Shields. That's my daddy." She pointed back at Travis, who felt suddenly exposed under the woman's gaze. He stepped forward, his hands shoved deep in the pockets of his broken zippered jacket. "I'm so sorry. Nina, you can't just give your money to strangers." "But she needed it, Daddy." "I know, sweetheart, but—" "It's fine," the woman interrupted. She was looking at the $5 bill like it held answers to questions she'd been asking for years. "She's remarkable. This is the kindest thing anyone has done for me in a very long time." Travis studied her face. There was something there, a loneliness that matched his own, a recognition of what it meant to carry burdens no one else could see. "She gets it from her mother," he said quietly. The announcement echoed through the station. Brooklyn line, departing in 5 minutes. That's us, Travis said, gently taking Nina's hand. We have a doctor's appointment. The woman stood, wiping her eyes. Me too. I'm going that direction. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a question neither was ready to ask yet. They ended up in the same train car. Nina claimed the window seat immediately and launched into enthusiastic commentary about everything they passed. Buildings, graffiti, a pigeon that had somehow gotten into the tunnel. Travis apologized 3 more times for the $5 incident. Each time, the woman told him to stop, and each time he caught her studying him when she thought he wasn't looking. I'm Paige, by the way. I should have introduced myself earlier. Travis? He said simply, offering his hand for a handshake. Did you know that the T-Rex probably had feathers? Nina announced, abandoning the window to join the adult conversation. My friend Jaden says that's not true, but I showed him a book and he was wrong. I like being right. Paige's lips curved into a genuine smile, the first one Travis had seen from her. Smart girl. I like being right too.
For the next 20 minutes, Nina held court, explaining dinosaur facts with the authority of a 5-year-old who'd watched too many documentaries. Paige listened with what appeared to be genuine fascination, asking questions that made Nina beam with pride. Travis watched the two of them, something warm and unexpected stirring in his chest. It had been so long since he'd seen Nina this animated with someone new, so long since he'd felt anything other than the constant pressure of survival. You're good with her, he said during a brief pause when Nina went back to window watching. Paige's expression softened. She's easy to be good with. She searched for the word. Uncomplicated. She says what she means. She feels what she feels. There's no subtext, no agenda. Most adults aren't like that. No. Her eyes met his. Most adults aren't. The train began to slow. Paige stood, gathering a simple canvas bag Travis hadn't noticed before. This is my stop, she said. It was nice meeting you, Travis said, and meant it more than he'd expected to. And thank you for being kind about the whole thing. She was kind first. I just received it. Paige looked down at Nina. Goodbye, Nina. Thank you for seeing me. Bye. I hope you feel happy soon. Paige's smile was bittersweet as she stepped off the train. Travis watched through the window as she walked about 20 feet down the platform, then stopped, turned, looked back at them with an expression he couldn't quite read. Then she disappeared into the crowd. It wasn't until they were the next stop away that Nina tugged at his sleeve. Daddy, look! She was pointing at the seat where Paige had been sitting. There, tucked against the window, was the canvas bag. Travis grabbed it, his heart racing. He looked up, searching for her through the windows, but she was long gone. The platform was crowded, and he had no idea which direction she'd taken, or how to find her.
We should give it back, Nina said sullenly. That's what good people do. I know, sweetheart. I just don't know how to find her. The clinic waiting room smelled like antiseptic and artificial flowers. Nina sat beside Travis, swinging her legs and coloring in a book the receptionist had given her. She hummed while she worked, a tuneless melody that somehow made the sterile space feel warmer. Travis stared at the forms in his lap: medical history, insurance information, payment options. The words blurred together. Patient requires bilateral myringotomy with tube placement. Estimated cost, $12,000. He had been here before. Different clinic, different procedure, but the same impossible numbers staring back at him. The same crushing realization that no matter how hard he worked, how many hours he put in, how much he sacrificed, it would never be enough. 2 years ago, he would have had the money. 2 years ago, he had a good job, a savings account, a life that made sense. But 2 years ago, Elena had still been alive. The memory hit him without warning, the way they always did, sharp and sudden like a knife between his ribs. Promise me you'll take care of our girl. Elena's hand in his, so thin he was afraid to squeeze too hard. The hospital room dim, machines beeping steady rhythms that sounded nothing like a heartbeat. I promise. And promise me you won't stop living. Nina needs you whole, Travis, not broken, not just surviving. I don't know how to do that without you. You'll figure it out. Her smile was weak but certain. You're stronger than you think. He kept the first promise. Barely. But the second one, that felt impossible some days. After Elena died, everything unraveled. The medical bills had drained their savings, the funeral costs had taken the rest, and Travis had lost his job. Not immediately, but gradually, as he'd burned through sick days and vacation time and every ounce of goodwill his boss had for him. "I'm sorry," his manager said, sliding termination papers across the desk, "but we need someone who can actually be here." Travis hadn't argued. He just signed the papers and gone back to the hospital where Elena was waiting for her next round of chemotherapy that wouldn't save her.
Getting another job in his field, logistics coordination, had proven impossible. 2 years out of the workforce, references that came with asterisks, an employment gap that made hiring managers nervous. So he'd taken whatever work he could find. Loading trucks at a warehouse, cleaning offices at night, odd jobs through apps that paid minimum wage and offered no benefits. 60 hours a week, and he still barely made rent. "Mr. Shields?" Dr. Harrison appeared in the doorway, a kind-faced woman in her 50s who'd been treating Nina's hearing issues for 3 months now. Travis stood, leaving Nina with her coloring book. They stepped into the hallway, and he already knew what she was going to say from the expression on her face. "We can't wait much longer," Dr. Harrison said gently. "The fluid buildup is getting worse. If we don't do the surgery soon, there's a real risk of permanent damage to her hearing." "I know." Travis's voice was rough. "I'm working on the money. I've got 10,000 saved. I just need 2,000 more." "I know." She touched his arm briefly. "We can set up a payment plan, but the surgery itself needs to happen within the next month. 6 weeks maximum." Travis nodded, his throat tight. "I'll figure it out." But as he signed more papers and collected Nina from the waiting room, he had no idea how he was going to keep that promise. That night, after Nina was asleep, Travis sat at their small kitchen table and stared at Paige's canvas bag. He'd been putting off opening it, though he wasn't sure why. Maybe because it felt like an invasion of privacy. Maybe because it represented something he didn't understand yet, a connection he hadn't expected to feel with a stranger who'd cried on a bench. Finally, he unzipped it.
Inside was a simple wallet, no cash, just a few cards, and a single ID badge with a phone number written on the back. Paige Ross. The name meant nothing to him. The photo on the badge showed the same woman from the train, though in this picture her hair was styled, her makeup professional. She looked polished in a way that didn't match the worn jeans and tired eyes he'd seen today. Travis stared at the phone number for a long time. Then, before he could talk himself out of it, he dialed. She answered on the third ring. "Hello? Hi, this is going to sound strange. We met on the train today. I'm Travis, Nina's dad, the $5 thing." A pause. Then her voice came back, warmer now, almost relieved. "You found my bag. You left it on the seat. Before we'd noticed, you were already gone. That was careless of me." She didn't sound upset. If anything, she sounded expectant, like she'd been waiting for this call. "I wanted to return it. I could drop it off somewhere, or mail it, or—" "Actually," she interrupted, "would you be willing to meet me? There's a cafe, Cornerstone Coffee in Midtown. Saturday morning, maybe? Around 10? Travis hesitated. He didn't know this woman, had spent maybe 30 minutes in her presence, but there was something about her, something that made him want to say yes. "I could do Saturday." "Perfect." Another pause. "And Travis, bring Nina with you. I'd love to see her again." Cornerstone Coffee was exactly the kind of place Travis would never have found on his own, tucked between a dry cleaner and a bookshop, small and unassuming, with mismatched furniture and the smell of good espresso. She wore jeans again, a soft blue sweater, minimal makeup, nothing that gave away who she really was. Paige spotted her immediately and ran over like they were old friends. "Hi, we brought your purse. Daddy said we had to be responsible." Paige accepted the canvas bag with a smile that lit up her whole face. "Thank you for taking such good care of it." Travis slid into the seat across from her, suddenly aware of his worn clothes, his scuffed shoes, the general air of struggling that he couldn't quite shake no matter how hard he tried. They ordered drinks, hot chocolate for Nina, black coffee for Travis, another tea for Paige. The conversation started simple, safe. Where do you live? What do you do? How old is Nina? Does she like school? Paige was vague about her own life. Said she worked in technology, said she traveled a lot. Didn't mention company names or titles or anything that would give away more than she was ready to share. Travis didn't press. He understood the desire for privacy. Nina, meanwhile, had discovered that Paige had never seen her favorite dinosaur documentary and was explaining the entire plot with the kind of detail that suggested she'd watched it at least 50 times. Nina headed toward the pastry case, and Travis found himself alone with Paige for the first time since they'd sat down. "Thank you," he said, "for all the dinosaur questions. Most adults just nod and smile. I wasn't pretending." Paige's voice was genuine. "I actually wanted to know if velociraptors really could open doors." Travis laughed, a real laugh, the kind that felt rusty from disuse. "Can they?" According to Nina, absolutely. According to science, maybe. According to Jurassic Park, definitely. Something in her smile made him feel like maybe the world wasn't as heavy as it had been 20 minutes ago. Before they knew it, Nina returned with a request for a chocolate croissant and a detailed justification for why she deserved one. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them. They stayed for 2 hours. The conversation deepened gradually, the way it does between people who recognize something familiar in each other. Travis told her about Elena, not the cancer, not the death, but who she'd been, her laugh, her obsession with true crime podcasts, the way she danced in the kitchen while making breakfast, even when there was nothing to celebrate. "She sounds wonderful," Paige said softly. She was. And losing her... Travis stopped, the words catching. "It's like someone rearranged the world while I wasn't looking. Everything looks the same from the outside, but nothing fits together anymore." Paige was quiet for a moment. Then, "I lost my parents when I was 15. A house fire. I came home from a school trip to nothing. No family, no possessions, no photographs. Just an aunt who took me in reluctantly and cousins who resented the intrusion." Travis heard what she wasn't saying. The loneliness, the years of feeling untethered, the way loss could reshape you into someone you barely recognized. "Nina's been having hearing problems," he heard himself say. The words came out before he could stop them, pulled forward by the strange intimacy of this conversation. "Fluid buildup. She needs surgery, but the cost..." He shook his head. "We're working on it." Paige's expression flickered, something complex, quickly hidden. "That must be terrifying." "It is. She's my whole world, and I can't..." He stopped, embarrassed by the emotion rising in his throat. "Sorry, I don't usually unload on people I just met." "You didn't unload. You shared." She reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. "There's a difference." When it was time to leave, Paige pulled a small wrapped package from her bag. "For Nina, a thank you." Nina tore into it with enthusiasm, revealing a beautiful leather-bound journal with her name embossed on the cover. "It's for writing stories, or drawing pictures, or keeping secrets, whatever you want." Nina's eyes went wide. "It has my name on it." "It does, because you're worth remembering." Then Nina dug into her own pocket and pulled out a small chain with a single crocheted bead, lumpy, uneven, clearly made by tiny hands with more heart than skill. "This is for you. I made it myself. Mrs. Priska next door taught me. It's my first one ever, so it's not very good, but Daddy says the first try is always special." Paige took the chain like it was made of diamonds. Her eyes were bright with tears she was clearly trying not to shed. "It's perfect," she whispered. "I'll treasure it always." Paige went home that afternoon and cried. Not sad tears, or not entirely. Relief, maybe.
Gratitude. The overwhelming realization that she'd just experienced something she'd stopped believing was possible. Travis didn't know who she was. Nina certainly didn't. They'd treated her like a person, just a person, and it had been the most precious gift she'd received in years. She looked at the crocheted bead in her hand, lumpy and imperfect, and made with so much love, and felt something crack open in her chest. A wall she'd built carefully over years, designed to keep everyone out, suddenly had a breach. That morning, the morning she'd sat on that bench at Grand Central, she'd been trying to escape. The email had arrived early, a family reunion announcement, forwarded by her assistant who didn't know any better. Her aunt's annual gathering, the one Paige had attended every year as a child, back when her parents were alive and the world made sense. She hadn't been invited in 5 years. So, she'd done what she always did when the loneliness became unbearable. She'd dressed to disappear. Old jeans, a thrift store coat, hair pulled back, silenced her phone. Ignored the board meetings, the crises, the endless demands. She'd gone to Grand Central Station because it was the last place anyone would look for Paige Ross, CEO of Horizon Technologies. She hadn't meant to cry. She'd just wanted to sit somewhere anonymous, somewhere she could be nobody for a little while.
But then the thoughts came. The reality of her life. Everything she'd built, everything she'd sacrificed. And what did she have to show for it? Billions of dollars. An empire. And absolutely no one to share it with. She had everything and nothing at the same time. The tears had come then, uncontrollable and raw, in the middle of a crowded train station where hundreds of people passed by without stopping. And then a little girl had walked over, had seen her, had offered $5 with hands too small to understand what wealth meant, but big enough to understand what kindness required. For the first time in years, Paige had felt truly seen, not as a CEO, not as a checkbook, just as a person who was hurting, a person worth comforting. For the past decade, Paige had learned to measure people by what they wanted from her. It was a survival mechanism, developed after too many relationships that revealed themselves to be transactions in disguise. Her aunt and cousins had been the first lesson. After her parents died, they'd taken her in, but never let her forget it was charity. Then, when she'd started making real money with Horizon Technologies, suddenly they were interested in maintaining the relationship. Loans that were never repaid, investment opportunities that were actually bailouts, guilt trips dressed up as family obligations. For years, she'd said yes, because they were all she had, because she was terrified of being alone. Then, 5 years ago, she'd finally said no. And they'd cut her off completely. No more invitations, no more calls, just silence. And the occasional passive-aggressive comment that found its way back to her through mutual acquaintances.
Romantic relationships had been no better. Every person she dated had eventually revealed an ulterior motive. Networking opportunities, investment requests, the prestige of being seen with a billionaire CEO. So she'd stopped trying, built her empire, made her fortune, and convinced herself that being alone was safer than being used. But then a 5-year-old girl had walked up and given her everything she had. And her father had looked at Paige like she was worth knowing, not worth exploiting. They didn't want anything from her. Couldn't want anything, because they didn't know what she had. And now she knew about Nina's surgery. The $12,000 gap that was crushing a man who'd already lost everything. She couldn't offer to pay directly. That much was clear. Travis had pride. The good kind. The kind that came from working hard and providing for his family against impossible odds. If she showed up with a check, she'd be insulting him, reducing their connection to a transaction. But she could help anonymously. Paige spent the rest of the weekend making calls. She found the best pediatric ear surgeon in the tri-state area, Dr. Eleanor Whitfield at Manhattan Specialty Clinic, renowned for her work with children. She set up a fund through a shell foundation she'd created years ago for exactly these kinds of interventions. By Monday morning, everything was in place. She had her assistant draft a letter herself, choosing every word carefully. Dear Mr. Shields, we are pleased to inform you that your daughter, Nina Shields, has been selected for full surgical coverage through our Pediatric Care Initiative. We have only one request. Please tell Nina to spend her $5 on the books you wanted. She'll understand. Paige read it 3 times before approving it. Then she sat in her office, 40 floors above Manhattan, walls of glass that made her feel both powerful and invisible, and wondered if she'd just made the bravest or most cowardly decision of her life.
The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Travis had been sitting at his kitchen table, staring at bills and trying to figure out which ones could wait another month when he saw the envelope. Whitfield Foundation, a name he'd never heard. He almost threw it away, assuming it was junk mail. But something made him open it. We are pleased to inform you. Full surgical coverage. Please tell Nina to spend her $5 on the book she wanted. Travis read it 3 times. Then he sat down on the kitchen floor and cried. The $5 comment. It had to be Paige. There was no one else who could have known. But why anonymously? And why hadn't she said anything at the cafe? He tried calling her that night. The number went straight to voicemail. Paige, it's Travis. I got the letter. I know it was you. I don't know how to thank you. Please call me back. Nothing. He tried again 3 days later. Same result. A week passed, then 2. The surgery happened exactly as the letter promised. Dr. Whitfield was extraordinary. Kind, competent, explaining everything in Nina's terms could understand. The procedure was textbook perfect. The fluid was drained, the pressure relieved, and Nina's hearing was fully preserved. She spent one night in the hospital, charming every nurse on the floor and convincing an orderly to sneak her an extra pudding cup. Travis spent that night alternating between overwhelming gratitude and burning confusion. Why would Paige do something so generous and then disappear? He called again and again. The number was still active. It rang before going to voicemail, but she never answered. 2 weeks became 3. 3 became 4. Travis told himself it was fine. She'd done an incredibly generous thing. Maybe she didn't want recognition. Maybe she had her reasons. But it hurt more than he'd expected. He'd felt something in that cafe. A connection. A possibility. Something that had made him think maybe life wasn't done surprising him in good ways. Apparently, he'd been wrong.
Paige knew she was being a coward. Every time Travis's name appeared on her phone, she felt a surge of longing so intense it scared her. She wanted to answer, wanted to hear his voice, hear about Nina, hear that the surgery had worked and everything was okay. But answering meant explaining, and explaining meant revealing who she was. She'd seen it happen so many times before. The warmth that turned calculating, the friendship that became networking, the way people's eyes changed when they realized what she could do for them. Travis wasn't like that. She believed it, truly believed it. He was good, genuinely good. But believing wasn't the same as knowing. And Paige had been burned so many times that she'd forgotten how to trust her own judgment about people. So she let the calls go to voicemail, deleted the messages without listening, and told herself it was better this way. She wore Nina's crocheted bead on a chain around her neck, tucked beneath her shirts where no one could see it. In meetings, she'd reach up and touch it, remember what it felt like to be seen. And then she'd tell herself that some things weren't meant to last. 4 weeks after the surgery, Travis took Nina to Cornerstone Coffee. It wasn't planned. They'd been walking home from a follow-up appointment with Dr. Whitfield. Everything looked perfect. Her hearing was completely normal. And Nina had spotted the sign. "Daddy, look, that's where we met the nice lady. Can we go in? Maybe she's there." "Sweetheart, I don't think—" But Nina was already pulling him through the door, her eyes bright with hope. And there, at the same corner table where they'd sat 3 weeks ago, was Paige. She looked up and saw them. For one unguarded moment, her face was completely open, relief and longing and fear all mixed together. Then she was reaching for her bag, preparing to leave. But Nina was faster.
"It's you!" She sprinted across the cafe and threw herself at Paige with an enthusiastic hug. "I missed you. Where did you go?" Paige's hands were trembling as she hugged Nina back. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Travis approached slowly. When Nina finally released her grip, he slid into the seat across from Paige. "It was you," he said quietly. "Not a question." She closed her eyes. "Yes. The surgery, the foundation, all of it. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you disappear?" Paige was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I was afraid. Because everyone I've ever let close has eventually wanted something from me, and I couldn't bear the thought of watching that happen with you. You and Nina, you saw me, really saw me. Not what I could do for you, just me. And I didn't want to ruin that. Ruin it how?" She took a deep breath. "My name is Paige Ross. I'm the CEO of Horizon Technologies." She paused, her voice quieter now. "I'm a billionaire, Travis, and the reason I disappeared is because everyone who's ever known has eventually wanted something from me. Everyone." Travis was quiet, processing. "You thought I'd treat you differently, if I knew. Everyone does. I'm not everyone." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm a warehouse worker who couldn't afford surgery for my own daughter. I'm about as far from your world as it's possible to get." He squeezed her fingers gently. "And I don't care about any of it. Not your money, not your company, not your status." He paused, his voice thick with emotion.
I care that you cried on a bench and let a 5-year-old comfort you. I care that you listened to dinosaur facts like they were the most important thing in the world. I care that you accepted my daughter's lumpy crocheted bead like it was treasure." Paige stared at him. The tears she'd been holding back spilled over. "You mean that?" "I mean it." Nina looked up from the sugar packet she'd been folding. "Why is everyone crying? Is this a sad day?" Travis laughed, wiping his eyes. "No, sweetheart, this is a happy day." They took it slow. Paige started showing up to the small things, Saturday morning pancakes at Travis's cramped apartment, where she learned that he made them in weird shapes because Nina insisted they were more fun that way. Walks in the park, where Nina provided running commentary on every dog, pigeon, and interesting leaf. Quiet evenings on the lumpy couch, watching movies and not talking about quarterly reports or board meetings. Travis treated her exactly as he'd promised, like a person. He didn't ask about her company, didn't treat her differently when she wore her normal clothes versus the few times she couldn't avoid looking like a CEO. He just saw her. But it wasn't always easy. The first real argument happened 2 months in. Travis had mentioned, casually, that his landlord was raising the rent. He'd said it the way someone mentions the weather, just a fact of life, nothing to be done about it. Paige's immediate response was to offer to cover it. "No." Travis's voice was firm in a way she hadn't heard before. "It's not a big deal." "It is to me." He set down his coffee cup carefully, like he was trying to keep his hands from shaking. "Paige, I appreciate what you did for Nina. I'll be grateful for that for the rest of my life. But I need to handle my own bills. That's pride talking." "Maybe, but it's my pride." His eyes met hers. "If you start paying my rent, what am I? What does this become?"
Paige had wanted to argue, wanted to point out that money meant nothing to her, that helping the people she cared about was the whole point of having it. But she saw something in his face that stopped her, a line she couldn't cross without losing him. "Okay," she said quietly. "I understand." And slowly, painfully, she learned to let him struggle, to sit beside him while he worked through problems instead of solving them for him, to offer support instead of solutions. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done. Travis, for his part, had his own learning to do. When Paige offered to take Nina to a museum, a special exhibit Nina had been talking about for weeks, Travis almost said no.
The tickets were expensive and he couldn't afford to pay his share. But Paige had pulled him aside, her voice gentle but firm. "This isn't about money. This is about me wanting to spend time with someone I care about. If our positions were reversed, if you had something you wanted to share with me and Nina, would you want me to say no just because I couldn't contribute financially?" He'd thought about it. Then, reluctantly, he'd said yes. Accepting her help without feeling bought took practice. But slowly he learned the difference between charity and care. They had other arguments too, about boundaries, about what was appropriate, about the time Paige suggested hiring a private tutor for Nina's dinosaur obsession, and Travis had looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "She's 5, Paige. She doesn't need a tutor. She needs library books and imagination. But what if she wants to really pursue this? Then we'll support her when she's old enough to know what pursue means. Right now, she just likes dinosaurs. Let her be a kid." Paige had backed down, and secretly, she had been relieved. She'd been testing herself, making sure she didn't slip back into the habit of throwing money at everything. Travis kept her grounded in ways she desperately needed. 3 months in, something shifted. Travis came home one evening with an expression Paige had never seen before, something between excitement and disbelief. "I got a job. A real one. Logistics coordinator at a distribution company in Queens." Nina cheered. Paige stood up, her heart swelling. "Travis, that's amazing. He know you probably want to celebrate, but I need to say something first." He looked at her directly. "You didn't help with this, did you? You didn't call anyone or put in a word or—" "No." Paige's voice was firm. "I didn't. You told me you needed to do this yourself, and I respected that." She had wanted to help, had fought the urge every single day for 3 months to make a phone call, to leverage her network, to smooth the path for him. But she'd known that if she did, it would break something fundamental between them. "I believe you." Travis's shoulders relaxed. Then he smiled. A real, genuine smile that made him look years younger. "I start next week. Benefits and everything. It's not much, but it's stable. It's everything," Paige said softly. That night, they celebrated with takeout pizza and sparkling cider. Nina made a congratulations card with so much glitter it would be finding its way into the carpet for months. And Paige realized something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She was falling in love. Not with the idea of love or the security of companionship, but with this specific man who made weird-shaped pancakes and refused her money and fought his way back to stability on his own terms.
6 months in, Paige made a decision. She called an emergency board meeting at Horizon Technologies. "I'm stepping back," she announced. "Effective immediately, I'm transitioning to a consulting role. I'll handle major strategic decisions, but I won't be involved in day-to-day operations." The room erupted. Questions, objections, concerns about shareholders and optics and succession planning. Paige let them talk. Then she held up a hand. "For 10 years, I've built this company. I've sacrificed relationships, health, happiness, everything to make Horizon what it is, and I'm proud of that. But I've also realized something." She paused. "Success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. I'm not abandoning the company. I'm just making room for the rest of my life." The board was confused. The press was confused. Stock analysts wrote think pieces about work-life balance and whether female CEOs faced different pressures than their male counterparts. Travis just said, "Finally," and pulled her into a hug that felt like coming home. Nina asked if this meant Paige could come to her school play. "Every single one," Paige promised. And she did. She sat in the front row and cried when Nina delivered her 3 lines as tree number 2. She helped with homework and attended parent-teacher conferences and learned that being present mattered more than being perfect. The night of Nina's play, Travis took Paige's hand as they walked home. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For this. Us. A life that probably looks small compared to what you had." Paige stopped walking, turned to face him. "Travis, do you know what I had before? Board meetings where people smiled to my face and plotted behind my back. Galas where everyone wanted something. An empty apartment with a view of the city and no one to share it with." She squeezed his hand. "This isn't smaller. This is everything."
A year after that first meeting on the train platform, Travis decided to propose. The new job had changed things. He wasn't rich, but he wasn't drowning anymore either. For the first time in years, he could save without sacrificing. And he'd been putting money aside for months, building towards something that mattered. He bought a simple ring, modest but beautiful. Then he planned the location carefully. Grand Central Station, the exact bench where Nina had given away her $5. It was a Saturday morning. He told Paige he wanted to show her something. Nina was in on the secret, practically vibrating with excitement. When they reached the bench, Travis's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. This is where it started, where Nina saw someone who needed kindness and gave everything she had. Paige looked at the bench, then at him, her eyes already bright with understanding. "I don't have much to offer you. I can't give you fancy vacations or expensive gifts. I can't match what you're used to. But I can give you this." He dropped to one knee, pulling out the small box. A life where you're seen, where you're chosen, where you never have to hide who you are. Nina couldn't contain herself anymore. She came running out from behind a pillar where she'd been hiding, yelling, "Say yes! Say yes! Say yes!" before Travis could even finish. Paige was crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes, yes, of course yes." The ring slid onto her finger. Simple, perfect, worth more to her than anything she'd ever owned.
The wedding was small, 30 people in a garden venue upstate. No press, no paparazzi, no business contacts trying to network. Just family. The real kind. The chosen kind. Nina was the flower girl, scattering petals with aggressive enthusiasm and providing running commentary on her technique. "I'm doing a spiral pattern. It's very advanced." In her vows, Paige said, "A year ago, I was sitting on a bench, convinced that all my success meant nothing because I had no one to share it with. Then, a 5-year-old walked up and gave me everything she had. You saw me when I was invisible. You showed me that family isn't about obligations or transactions. It's about choosing to show up every single day for the people you love." In his vows, Travis said, "You didn't save us, Paige. You joined us. You became part of our team, and that's even better than saving." Elena would have loved you. Loved how you listened to Nina's dinosaur facts, how you can't cook rice to save your life, but you keep trying. She'd want this for us, and I'm so grateful I get to have it. When they kissed, Nina cheered so loudly that half the guests laughed. 5 years later, Travis stood in the doorway of their Brooklyn brownstone, watching the chaos of a Tuesday evening unfold. The walls were covered in Nina's artwork and photographs from years of building a life together. The house was bigger than his old apartment, but not ostentatious. A real family home, with scuffed floors and crayon marks on the walls, and a backyard where their rescue dog, Pudding, was currently barking at a squirrel.
Nina was 10 now, her hearing perfect, her curly blonde hair wilder than ever. She just started a kindness club at her school. Kids doing small acts of generosity for strangers, raising money for families who couldn't afford medical care. They'd raised over $5,000 in 6 months. It all started with $5, she'd told the local news reporter who came to cover the story. "My mom in heaven taught me that kindness costs nothing, but is worth everything. And my mom here taught me that it's never too late to invest in people." Travis had cried watching that interview. Paige came up behind him now, wrapping her arms around his waist. She still wore the crocheted bead on a chain, joined now by a lopsided clay heart their son Julian had made in preschool. Julian was 3, obsessed with trucks and drawing on any surface he could reach. He had Travis's brown hair and Paige's determined chin, and absolutely no concept of personal boundaries. "What are you thinking about?" Paige asked, resting her chin on Travis's shoulder. "That day on the platform. What would have happened if Nina hadn't seen you crying? We would have missed each other. We would have missed everything." From the living room, Nina's voice rang out. Julian drew on the wall again. "It's art!" Julian's tiny voice protested. From somewhere in the chaos, Pudding began barking at the vacuum cleaner, which no one had even turned on. Travis smiled. His life was loud and messy and nothing like he'd planned. His wife was a billionaire who still couldn't cook rice without burning it. His daughter was trying to save the world $5 at a time. His son thought walls were acceptable canvases, and Pudding, their rescue dog, had declared war on every vacuum cleaner, squirrel, and suspicious shadow in the house. It was perfect. It was home. And it had all started with a little girl who gave away her last $5 to a crying stranger, because she'd learned that kindness costs nothing, but is worth everything. Some investments, it turns out, pay dividends forever. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please, don't let it end here. Let it remind you, kindness still matters, compassion still changes lives, and hope is never wasted. Subscribe and be part of our Soul Lift Stories family, where every story lifts the spirit and reminds us that light always finds its way back. And if this moment moved you, share it, because sometimes sharing hope is the kindest thing we can do.